Welcome back. This is episode 2 of the Existential Lounge. Today we're going to be talking about the two opposing schools of thought being free will and determinism.
Free will is the idea that we have complete autonomy over all of our choices and actions. That if I decide to move my arm up, that was me of my own volition, completely, no extenuating factors. I decide to wake up in the morning and drive to work. I decide what I'm going to have for dinner that day, et cetera, et cetera.
And determinism is the idea that we live in a causal universe where everything that happens is because of a preceding event. Essentially, picture like dominoes, that like one domino can only fall if a preceding domino lands into it. So it kind of describes the physics of reality, that like everything that happens just happens because something set it into motion.
Exactly. And we are both of the idea that we agree with the latter. We say that everything is caused by a preceding event or events. A lot of different things influence decisions, choices, the way we act, the way we react, the things that happen, the things that don't happen. They're all a result of previous things. Essentially, we can follow that domino effect all the way back to the beginning of everything.
Definitely. So if we were to like break down the word free will, I think it just starts with first free, seeming like this word that can be embodied with words like infinite or boundless, something that has no limitations.
Right. And will is the ability to act, the ability to set action in motion. So essentially, we have the unending, infinite ability to initiate action.
Would you say will can also be something that we are desiring? Maybe we may not be able to do it, but like if I will something to happen, but maybe I just don't have the ability to do it, that could still be part of the definition. Where
so like a desire, essentially. Yeah,
desire, and then it's something you can also just act upon.
For example, like if I'm craving a certain type of food, if I'm in this room right now, I can't just put together some random food here, but I can be desiring it and I'm still willing that.
Yeah, definitely.
What we're going to do here today is essentially go over what we believe to be the overwhelming amount of evidence that goes against any of us having any free will. It goes from biological to
external factors,
internal, just intrinsic things within us that don't allow for the idea of free will as defined that way.
Yeah, we just believe that if there are elements that have influenced us in any way, shape, or form, if I'm going to do something, that there are some elements, be it in my surroundings or how I am as a person, that if some form of influence existed, that any decision cannot be free insofar as there's some form of influence.
Right, and I think that's a good distinction to make here, because there are the schools of thought that have a more compatibilism approach and say that we can have free will within a deterministic system. We are completely going against that. Essentially, free will, we see it as almost a dogmatic thing. It's either you have it or you don't. You can't partly have free will.
Correct.
In the way that we are seeing it. Glad to have my mind changed, but as it stands now, that seems to be the most logical stance to hold.
Definitely. So I think a great way to prime what we're talking about, right? Because it really does feel like we're free. It feels like I have the choice right now to lift my hand, to clap it, to do whatever I want, right? It really does feel convincingly like this is the case. However, the illusion of free will is very similar to standing really close to a window, and you're so caught up in seeing outside of the window that it only took a small change in perspective to see the glass right in front of you. And once you have that shift, you can't not help but see the glass anymore. And so an example is like, for instance, I don't know the next place my eyes are going to look, right? If you were to pause this video and take like 10 seconds of your time to be like, you know what, I'm going to take a moment, see if I can predict the next place my eyes are going to look. You can do the same thing with your thoughts. You can do the same thing with the way you move your body. Say, yeah, I could say I'm going to move my hand, right, like this, but I could have moved it like this. I am in no position to identify why.
The causal factors
Yeah,
there. Yeah,
why.
something influenced why we did each one of these things, regardless of
Correct.
what it is that we ended up doing. Something has influenced that. We can't identify it, but the fact that there is something already negates that idea of complete free will.
Definitely. Okay.
So another thought experiment, I suppose, that we can look into is: did you have the freedom to be born to whom you were born to the demographic to which you were born, to the socioeconomic status that you were born, in the millennia that you were born, with the resources you were afforded when you were born, to be born able-bodied, to be born of good health, to be born male or female, to be born any of these different things are completely out of our control, yet through life, each one of these things are going to greatly dictate every decision we make. So how can those decisions be completely ours if they are predicated by something that initially was out of our control?
Correct. Like, for instance, we're sitting here doing a video right now, and I mean, if we were born just 100 years before we wouldn't be sitting down doing a recording, because
Right.
people didn't have cell phones with cameras. Or if I was born 100 years ago but he wasn't,
We wouldn't
still
have
wouldn't
never
be
met.
here. Yeah, we would have never met. And what factors did I have a hand in choosing any of that? And I didn't at all.
Right.
And we just so happen to have technology that allows us to do this, which we didn't choose for that to exist. And so that just plays a large role in this.
Right. And just to touch on all those other factors, socioeconomic status, depending on which, we could have been born into a completely bottom of the rung society where neither of us would have had the accessibility to education to where we would have been able to be sitting here having this conversation to begin with.
Definitely.
Or
the availability to have the technology, like the financial ability to provide us with the tools to make this happen.
Make this video, right?
Yeah.
The fact that we were both born male, we would have met because we met happening to be grouped together in a dorm room in a college. That wouldn't have happened if one of us were the other sex. That would have never happened because they don't dorm those two things together.
Yeah.
Just so many of these factors that are essentially made for us before we were even born. But in the moments we were being conceived, I suppose these choices were made for us. They influence every single step of your life going forward.
Definitely. Even, we're interested in this topic. If we were to follow that thread, it goes very far back. It goes to like exposures as a child. Maybe, there was science channels on, or I was exposed to certain books at a young age that made this interesting, because a lot of people are exposed to things like this, but aren't interested in it at all. And it's hard to put a finger on exactly what elements made it, desirable.
It's
and
impossible,
what don't.
But I think
sometimes it can be impossible, for sure.
I think it's impossible to get any one thing that we decide. Say, again, we can say our interest in philosophy. It is entirely impossible to pinpoint every factor that has influenced why we sit here today and are both interested in philosophy. We can say some of them for sure. The books that were in front of us, the entertainment we consumed as kids, just general curiosity of the world, so many different things. But there are an infinite amount of things that it'd be almost arrogant of me to sit here and say, I enjoy philosophy because I decided to.
Yeah, and that opens a whole can of worms of, regarding what we like. Did you choose to like the sound, like the music of like Mozart over, a cat dying? Like, if we could choose what we like, wouldn't it make sense to choose to like everything? When you put a certain food in your mouth, there isn't a moment where you sit back and you go, I'm going to decide whether to like this or not. No, there's just a natural moment because of the precise way in which your taste buds are constructed, and
the things you were exposed to. Because if we were to look at this as a just entirely utilitarian point of view, we would want to like everything that goes in our mouth.
Yeah.
Because sustenance. That's the point of eating, is to fuel the body.
Correct.
So within that logic, we would want to like everything that would produce sustenance.
Correct.
But we don't. We
Yeah.
don't for a myriad of reasons that are completely out of our control.
Yeah.
The things we were raised eating, the culture that we were born into. Um, as Americans, we both are fairly familiar, I think, with to what seems to us very crazy cuisine of Asia. But to them, that's not crazy.
Mhm.
And to us, eating these things would be insane. But but to them, it's not, and that's all just part of that culture and those factors that are just out of our control to what is good to us.
So in the same way that you don't choose what foods taste good to you and what sounds sound nice and what don't, you can't choose what beliefs you hold to be true. So let's say you believe the earth is round, you can't right now with full conviction uh, believe that the earth is flat.
Right. And you can say, well, I can be shown overwhelming evidence of one thing, and that will change my mind on X idea.
Yeah.
But now you're introducing external factors.
Correct.
Now you're introducing those things that make it not your free will anymore.
Exactly. And so, at any given moment of our lives, we hold certain truths to be, certain ideas to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And we only hold those to be true because we were exposed to certain elements, certain beliefs that made us justify that.
Right.
And it's only given the exposures of those ideas that make us justify what we justify when we justify it, because we can be exposed to some
Exactly.
contrary information.
I think one that is going to be most relatable, that sticks with most people, is religion. The vast majority of the population is religious, and you were born into this thing most likely. Very few people are converts into something else. Most people will follow the religion that their parent believes, and you can't just wake up one morning and say, I will no longer believe in said religion. That kind of is just ingrained in your mind. And like we said earlier, there could be a myriad of evidence that will eventually sway you in a different direction. But at that point, you're introducing those external factors that play a large role in debunking that idea that it was ever your choice to change your mind.
Yeah, in the same way that religion has that type of influence, so too does culture, or the particular trajectory of humankind when you happen to exist with them. We wear types of clothes that we wear today
Right.
that are indicative of the time we're born. We wear shoes because they're expected of us, and we have certain stores that we
Yeah.
shop at because this is just what's normal, and they exist when we exist, and they're culturally popular. And there are so many elements that drive us to particular decisions because we're just born into all of it, and we follow these things because it's in our inherent just makeup to do that as well, because it's advantageous to our survival. It's advantageous to your survival to believe that clothes are important to wear, because if you don't wear them, well, given the laws that exist, you're going to get in trouble or be shunned by others, and we just instinctively really want to be a part of and belong.
Exactly. And the same thing we can just ad nauseum go over different points here. We can go into your political affiliation, just what political viewpoint do you hold, regardless of which one it is. It's based on the media that you're exposed to, what likely your parents were affiliated to and play in the house on whatever news network they decide. Um, the the institutions that you attend for education, the teachers that happen to be yours that you got assigned to out of your control, the classes that might be available at said school, the friends and circles you hang around with. All of these things will heavily influence what your political affiliation, what your ideological stances on various subjects are. And all of that doesn't happen in some vacuum that we can call you or us or me. It happens as a result of all the auxiliary things that move around us, the millions of auxiliary things that exist on any given day, any given moment.
And I think that I think the best way to analyze whether we can have free will is to find a situation where none of these factors played a role in anything that you're doing at any given moment.
Right.
And we fail to find a situation where that's the case, where it's the case that there wasn't some inherent aspect to your biology that made you do what you're doing the way you're doing it, or external factor that influenced you to do a particular thing.
Yes.
Um,
I think that a good way to look at it is, in order for someone to make a choice, that choice is going to be based on things that this person holds, right? So, what I'm going to have for lunch today, it may be sushi or it may be, I don't know, a sandwich. Sushi, a lot of people don't like because they don't like raw fish, but that's based on experiences that I've had. If we're saying someone has free will, it has to happen independent of any of these experiences. Essentially, for it to be free will of sound mind, a newborn would have to be making a decision that has yet to be influenced by anything outside.
correct.
Whereas that can't happen. Then there is no source to make the decision. Your decision is essentially curated to the things that seem logical based on your experiences. It's like a multiple choice exam where, are you free to choose whatever answer? Can I answer chair for 2 plus 2 if choices A through D are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I can't. My choices are already limited. So how can I possibly have free will if I am not free to pick from anything?
Yeah. I think another interesting thought experiment to use to push this idea is asking yourself to think of something right now. If you ask yourself, or just think, excuse me, of a fruit, right? I thought of banana automatically. But, you know, strawberry and orange didn't occur to me. Neither did watermelon. It just automatically banana. Am I free to choose that which did not occur to me? Right? Like, there are other fruits that exist that I know of that I could have named, but they didn't occur to me to think of. The only one that occurred to me to think of was banana. So, how can thoughts be free if
The brain is essentially picking from this vault of knowledge that it has,
Yeah.
but you don't necessarily have a say in what it picks out of that vault of knowledge.
Correct.
It kind of just shoots something at your head. You may be prompted to give an answer to a question, like we just said. If I say, hey Brandon, think of a fruit, now you've gotten this subject, and the brain then just goes into its like bank of knowledge and goes to what's fruit, picks one out, and then that's the one that comes out of your mouth.
Yeah.
You never made the decision. You weren't the one going into that bank of knowledge. Your brain kind of just did that on its own.
Yeah, it's as if this like hand inside of your brain is going in this hat with just words in it, and it just picks it out and goes, here, look at this one. For instance, literally try it yourself. Take a moment and think of different fruits and be very conscientious of the way in which these words are arising into your awareness. It is as though, like, seemingly random, as if someone else is picking them out for you to look at, and you're not choosing. It's like someone's picking a handout and you're just seeing these different
I think
fruits.
a really good parallel to draw here at a much more basic and fundamental level is the emergence of AI, how we can type in a prompt and it essentially pulls from the unlimited bank of the internet's knowledge to generate a picture.
Yeah.
So when we type in show me some fruits, it's whatever AI we're talking about, and whatever AI system, it'll pull from anything. But that AI didn't have the freedom per se to choose what it came out with. It just used essentially a word that lights up with things that apply to that word. So again, with fruit, it'll like just scan through everything it knows really fast and then pick out the thing that says fruit with it.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing our brain's doing at a much more complex level.
Yeah. So another element to life that drastically influences how we operate in our day-to-day life is our inherent biology. And for instance, I didn't choose to be born a male, and I would be living a very different life if I was born a woman and had a different reproductive system that had with it its own hormonal fluctuations and different brain chemistry that determines my moods, which determines my actions.
And also the societal differences with
Yeah.
how men and women both have different societal expectations placed on them, which heavily influence the way that they act, the choices that they make throughout their lives,
The things they
the
buy.
things we buy, the entertainment we consume. All of this is heavily dictated by these societal expectations. And we as males have no idea what it would be like to walk through life with the lens or the filter of women expectations in reality, whereas likewise they would have no idea what it is to live with the expectations that men live with. And those things completely change, so you'd be an entirely different human had that been the case.
Definitely. So, for example, another way that our inherent biology affects what we do is I enjoy working out. And like I wouldn't be able to work out if, for instance, I was born with cerebral palsy, autism, or some sort of debilitating illness that drastically decreased my capacity to engage in fitness and move my body the way that I want to. And I had no choice in not being born that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just so happens to be the case that I am able bodied and have the capacity to work out. And so I am. But I didn't choose to have this type of like ability that I do that allows me to.
And to circle back to the thing we were talking about previously with the differences between male and female biology, likewise, the results that you're getting from working out since how old were you? Really young. Those results would be drastically different had you been born a woman. Your biology, just the way that males carry more testosterone, etc., makes working out carry out completely different results.
Absolutely.
Another thing is we've been essentially exploring thought experiments here, and what I would say is more meta reasoning for why we don't have free will. There's also hard science experiments that have been ran that essentially disprove the ability to have free will. Benjamin Libet, I'm sorry, I'm
Might
not
be
sure.
LeBay. I'm not
Libet,
sure.
he's a neuroscientist, and in 1983 he conducted an experiment where EEG machines are hooked up to the brain and they measure activity via electrodes on the scalp. And what he would do is have the subjects hit a button whenever they decided that they're going to move, do action, essentially initiate action. That would be the will to do so, correct?
Yeah.
So what he realized after analyzing when the person was hitting the button and the electrode, the neurons in their brains firing off, is that the neurons in the brain fired off to initiate action about a half a second prior to the person saying that they have willed this thing into being.
Yeah.
So if we're saying that our will is what initiates action, it only would seem logical that the will would have to precede the beginning of the action.
Correct.
The action genesis per se. And we're seeing that it doesn't. Our brain starts essentially gearing up to make the action go before we've decided that we're going to start this action. The brain's doing this independent of us. Our will per se seems to be just a retrospective response to the activity that already took place in the brain.
Definitely.
Neither of us are physicists, but in a very simple way, we can understand the idea of quarks in quantum physics. They're the fundamental building block of everything in reality. So everything's made out of atoms. Atoms are made of protons, electrons, and neutrons. Protons, electrons, and neutrons are made of something called quarks. What we've discovered, or what quantum physicists have discovered, is that these quarks act completely independent of anything around them. Actually, when we try to measure their velocity, their position changes independent of us, which is an insane concept to wrap your mind around, that these things essentially exist in superposition, where when a viewer or an agent has seen it, it somehow no longer exists where it existed.
Yeah.
Again, neither of us are quantum physicists, but the fact that these things act independent of us, and yet we are all made out of them.
It's mind-blowing. And I think that what's interesting is sometimes people like to use the argument that randomness can equate to free will, that something happened, nothing necessarily predetermined that, And so therefore what must bubble from that is a freedom. However, just in the same way as when you think of a fruit right now and it is random and pops up into your head, randomness does not infer
free will.
yeah, free will. That it just in the same way as something determined won't necessitate that, neither will randomness, because it's just rolling a dice and then boom. If I roll a dice whether to get up or to say sitting, I'm not free because it was random and it just came up and it was like, boom, there's the answer, and then I'm going to act in accordance with that.
Right. Essentially, the idea of quantum particles having inherent randomness to them is an argument against determinism, but not an argument for free will. It's an argument that says that, hey, if there is inherent randomness to the building blocks of the universe, then the universe cannot be determined. Everything isn't causal, it's random. But even then, that doesn't give us, the conscious observer, some type of power to bend this randomness. The randomness is still independent of us, and we only act within accordance to that randomness.
Correct.
So we still have no free will. Essentially, think of a roller coaster. If the roller coaster is completely built, that's determinism. We're just riding that roller coaster wherever it goes, and it's all determined because the track of the roller coaster has already been laid. What quantum physics here is inferring is that the whole track isn't laid. It's being laid as we go on it, as there's some of it in front of us that keeps getting laid as we go. But nonetheless, we are on the roller coaster. We are not the conductors. We're not the engineers of this roller coaster. We're just on a roller coaster that is built as it moves forward.
Correct. So another way to view determinism is with a pool table, right? Picture the pool ball set up in a particular type of way, and you aim and hit them in a particular type of way. Now, imagine a supercomputer that had the ability to analyze and determine based off of all the different elements at play, be it, how hard I hit the ball, trajectory, or
the surface the balls are rolling on.
Exactly, yeah. The temperature in the room, all these different elements.
The amount of air resistance, all of that is going to play a role in where the balls end up after they've been hit.
Yeah, and if you had a computer strong enough to essentially analyze all of this data, you could predict where the ball is going to go
every single time.
Yeah, and if I hit the ball in the same way every single time, you're going to get the same result every single time.
Essentially, I can grab something right now and just throw it off this table. If I'm able to calculate the force with which I threw it, the temperature of the room, the material of the table, so what friction is being placed upon this thing, the weight, so we can calculate gravity and all that, we will know exactly where that ball is going to fall every single time. Now, if we take that same micro observation and apply it to the macro, so the entire universe, if we had a quantum computer that was powerful enough to take into account every single factor that leads to us making decisions, we can essentially calculate the universe every single time, every decision that will be made, every decision that has been made, et cetera, because we are able to take into account every single factor which leads into why this thing has happened.
Yeah.
So we've essentially laid every idea here out that says why we don't have free will, right? We've gone over the biology aspect, the psychology aspect, the science of it, the experiments that have been done. But this is some really big stuff. This changes our entire worldview. This changes the way that we act on a day-to-day basis. And if gone unchecked, this truth can have serious ramifications on our day-to-day lives. It can lead to some serious, very high levels of nihilism, almost like nothing matters if nothing is my choice. Why should I do anything? So an important thing to touch on when talking about this subject, we think, is how can we practically apply this to our lives? How can we practically hold this as true, but simultaneously have a productive life? So an idea that we have kind of, I don't know if we've coined this, but it's something we use on a regular basis when talking about this, is that there are universal truths which are all encompassing of the universe. They're the truths that exist independent of us, but we don't operate on a day-to-day basis on this universal macro level. We exist within the human scope of understanding. And within that scope, we have to move on our day-to-day basis, like our decisions will matter. because they do play a role. The illusion of decision may be there, but that still plays a large role in our lives and the people around us. So we have to move day to day. Like me deciding to get out of bed, even though we've accepted that we didn't really decide to get out of bed, but me deciding to get out of bed this morning will have positive ramifications in my life. Me deciding to go to the gym today will have positive ramifications in my life. If I allow this nihilistic view of nothing matters because nothing was actually inherently my choice, those things start deteriorating, and quickly so will day to day life.
Definitely. I think a way that the practical application can be used in your day-to-day life is by also looking at things that may be uncomfortable, things that we have to do regardless of whether we want to do them or not.
Like we said, there are some things like getting up in the morning, having drive, having this discipline to do things while understanding that us doing them isn't necessarily a complete autonomous choice. In those situations, we have to maneuver through life as if free will exists. But there are also moments that it's practical to operate as if it isn't. For example, I think empathy becomes a lot easier and a lot more doable for a lot of people when we apply to people who have agitated us, people who have made us angry, people who've done anything to displease us. If you apply the idea that that person couldn't have done anything else, that is a really good moment where we can, within that human scope of understanding, apply that no one has free will. I can't be mad at someone who did something wrong to me because based on every single thing that has happened in their life, they could have only made that decision.
Correct. So today we spoke about free will and determinism and why we don't believe we have the former. We spoke about practical ways to implement this idea into our day-to-day lives and to not live each and every moment as though this is the case, though.
Yeah, we went over the biological truths that exist that are inherent to us that disallow the idea of free will to be there. We spoke about um, our psychological phenomena that exist independent of us that don't allow us to have complete free will. We spoke about the external factors that exist that constantly influence our decisions. So, how can our decisions be ours? We spoke the same about internal factors that also do that same thing. We went over Benjamin Libet's experiments, which show brain activity taking place prior to us consciously saying we made a decision. And like Brandon just said, we went over how all of this, while true, it's impractical to live your day to day life with this being at the forefront of your mind. It's something that you have to accept and understand, but not practice on a day to day basis because it could really be a detrimental idea to hold every second of your life. If you guys have any ideas that you want to throw at us, anything you want to challenge on, we welcome it completely. We don't
Yeah.
presume to know anything. I'm not stating anything as fact. We're just saying this is what it seems like to us. And if anybody wants to argue back and or not even argue, just provide more to the conversation because it's what it really is.
Yeah.
There's no argument. Just drop it down in the comment section and we'll interact with anybody who wants to. It's what we want to do here.
Absolutely.
That wraps everything up for today. I did want to add that we have recently started uploading our podcast over to Spotify as well at the Existential Lounge. If you guys want to go, and it's better for you to just maybe listen to it on an audio version as opposed to a visual version, that can work for you. You guys can go follow and listen over there. We've also started the Existential Lounge on Instagram. You guys can get to know us a little bit more. There'll be some behind the scenes stuff, some our day-to-day lives. You can just see how what we're doing regularly. And that's we just want to create a community where it seems like we're all just sitting in this room talking together. Thank you, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.